A scientist and an inventor from Italy created the first electric battery in 1800. His name was Alessandro Volta. He was born in 1745 and died in 1827, so he lived during the 18th and the 19th century. In 1774, he became professor of physics at the Royal School for the Deaf in Milan, which is quite interesting because he himself could hear and speak just fine. But then again, it also shows how respected and renowned he already was as a scientist at that point in his life. He was a very curious person and liked to experiment with electricity. In fact, he came up with a device that produced an electric spark by rubbing two pieces of cloth together. And even though this was not the first time that someone produced such a spark, his version was the first one where the cloth was mounted on a wheel, which means he invented the first electrostatic generator. Volta also studied the newly discovered phenomenon of electrolysis, which is the decomposition of water into hydrogen and oxygen by means of electricity. This was done by passing a current through water. And he noticed that the hydrogen and oxygen produced were flammable and combustible. He even created the first hydrogen gas balloon, although it didn't float because he used water that contained a lot of impurities. If I remember correctly, he used wine, vinegar, or beer. Another interesting thing that he did was measuring the resistance of various materials. For example, he found out that a metal sphere could be made to attract small pieces of iron if it was charged with electricity. But then again, he was the first to ever discover that two different metals in contact with each other will produce a current if they are connected via a wire. This is now called the voltaic effect and is the principle behind all types of batteries. However, Volta wanted to create something better. He wanted a way to generate a continuous flow of electricity rather than a one-time discharge, like in the case of the electrostatic generator. And so in 1800, he invented the first electric battery, also called a voltaic pile. It consisted of alternating discs of zinc and copper, separated by cardboard discs soaked in a salt solution. Connecting the positive terminal of one battery to the negative terminal of another would create a circuit, and a current would flow. This invention had huge implications for science. For example, it enabled the discovery of many new elements, including sodium, potassium, calcium, strontium, barium, as well as the first synthetic element, iodine. Volta's battery was also used in the first electric motor, the first electric telegraph, as well as the first electric long-distance transmission system. But why is he not more famous? Well, probably because he was not the first one to come up with the idea of an electric battery. You see, there was a man named Luigi Galvani who was experimenting with frog legs and noticed that when he touched the legs with two different metals, they started twitching. He concluded that this was due to some kind of animal electricity. However, it turned out that the movement was actually caused by a current that flowed from one metal to the other through the frog leg. This is now called the Galvani effect and is the basis of all galvanic batteries. So although Volta was not the first to come up with the idea of an electric battery, he was the first to build one and improve upon it. And that's why we have the volt named after him as the unit of electrical potential difference. Now I hope that you know a bit more about Volta and his inventions. If you want to know more about the history of electricity, stay tuned for more updates. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.